Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, you may remember I don't know how long ago it was actually, some time ago, had a lovely lady called Jo who came on and was talking about trusts. And I had a lot of emails after that show saying, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do that, and you can't do the other. And I think Jo went away and she thought, well, I don't know about that. I've done my research, and she's written a book. Everyone's writing a book at the moment, including myself. Protect What's Yours, it says here, an easy guide to trust, wills and protection. It's not a huge book, so you haven't got to sort of, spend all hours of the day and night trying to understand it all. And it answers lots and lots of different questions. I thought it was worth getting Jo back on the show since our subsequent recording to find out A, how she's doing with it, and B, maybe find out more about trusts and what we should do. Hello, Jo.
Afternoon, Richard. Lovely to be back.
Nice to have you with us again. You've been busy writing a book.
Yeah.
And so how did it go? First of all, we had you on and you were talking about trusts and why people, might find benefit to put their belongings into a trust to stop lots of different people sort of getting their filthy hands on things that people have worked on for so long, or worked for, I should say. How did it go after that? Because as I said in the intro, I had a few emails from, let's just call them professional companies,
Yes.
who were very nervous about us having that. And a couple of them said, I think you should take the video down.
Yes. Like one of them said, you still haven't taken that video down, Richard. So,
Yeah.
they're a little bit worried, I think. I did have a look through some of the comments, but I've been really busy for the last 6 months. And I just want to say that it's been an absolute pleasure talking to, I must have spoken to over 150 people at least in the last 6 months, because the last show came on October the 21st, I believe, last year. And the response was fantastic. I mean, I had 300 emails in the first couple of days. They're still coming. I'm still talking to people. I've had to set up a booking system so I can fit it all in. Um, but I have spoken to some genuinely lovely, lovely people, and it's been such a positive experience. I can't thank people enough. Honestly, there are so many nice people in this country, you wouldn't believe it. I've had one email of complaint, which I received last Friday or the Friday before, out of must be 500 emails. And a few of the comments, a few of the not so nice comments on your show, they were basically saying, I didn't say this and I didn't say that, and Jo didn't mention the grog rules and she didn't mention this and she didn't mention that. Well, I only had 47 minutes and I can't get everything in to that time to do with private trusts. If I did, people would be falling asleep or they'd just be switching off.
Absolutely.
This was just an introduction, really, to pique people's interest and to let them go out and do their own research and see whether their loved ones or themselves are going to lose anything eventually without protecting it. Not everybody, it's not going to help everybody, but, most people who have got properties, it will help them.
Yes.
So the comments, well, I didn't mention this and I didn't mention that. Private trust is a big subject and I can't fit it all into an hour or less.
Well, and you're quite right to say that if you were to fit it all in, it's just too much information for people to take on an introductory video. And let me just say before we go any further, none of this is financial advice and none of this is legal advice. And people watching any video of people just sharing information need to do their own due diligence, and none of us take responsibility for something they may do.
As I said before, I am not legally trained, thank God. I'm not legally trained. I have just done my own research. I don't give advice on trusts. I give you facts. And I know a lot of facts, and that's why I've put it all in a book, because I've been asked over and over and over the same questions. And I thought, well, all this information I've collected over the last couple of years, stick it in a book, because obviously the same questions are very important. Can I sell my property once it's in trust? Yes, you can. What do I do when somebody dies and their property's in trust? It's all in there. The steps that you have to take when somebody passes over. Okay, most people know that you have to register the death, otherwise you can't have a funeral. But then people are a little bit stumped. what do we do after that? Who do we notify? Now, the
Mm.
process is slightly different if whether you've got a will or no will, or you've got a trust. It's much simpler if you have a will and a trust. The process, because especially a private trust, because it's private. Now, I'm going to get some kickback on what I'm about to say, but it's
Right.
private.
Okay.
And if you register with HMRC, you lose your privacy.
Yes.
But HMRC will say you need to do this regardless. But it is not the law. I've looked everywhere, and there is no, interestingly enough, there is no recorded instances where anyone has been prosecuted for not registering a trust. So that's very interesting.
Well, I mean, trusts have been going wrong. You say it here, and other people have said to me since the Crusades. And
Yeah,
if my memory serves me correctly, and I'm not that old, but I do seem to think that HMRC was not around before the Crusades. I may have got that wrong. Maybe
yeah.
His Majesty's Revenue and Collections were around before the Crusades, when Richard the Lionheart was going over there slaughtering various people. And maybe they were. Maybe they've always been. Maybe they actually were there before God. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. But they do seem to like to think that they're in a lot more control and give that impression.
Yeah, and as I said before, I don't give advice. I'm not qualified to give advice, but I do know the facts, and I can put a legal trust together, private trust together. And I've searched all these do's and don'ts, which they tell you, and there's really not a lot of law to back these up with. And getting back to private trust, if it's private, you can actually get anybody who's associated with that particular private trust to sign a non-disclosure, so they're not allowed to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, just logically, if you sign something, say I will not talk about it,
yeah.
then
I
someone
mean,
comes along and says you've got to disclose this information. So, sorry,
yeah.
I've got this. I've signed it. What am I do? I'd love to tell you all the secrets that so and so's got, but I just can't.
Exactly. I'm not allowed. It's against the law. I'll get prosecuted if I tell you what's in this trust. And wills. If a lot of wills are published, anyone can check out and look up a will, see who's left what to who, which is in a bit of invasion of privacy in its own. But
Yeah.
if you've got a private trust, then nobody needs to know, and
Quite.
that's something that people find it difficult to get their heads around when they want to do things in the legal manner. And all these rules and regulations are basically rules and regulations. I mean, they're not confirmed in law, a lot of them, and a lot of the times they will say, well, this might happen, or you may get fined £100, or your trustee may get fined £5,000 if it's not registered, or we may do this, we may do that. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you that there is no law in place to penalise people.
Mm.
It's just basically fear mongering, because we're not taught this in school. We're not taught how to protect our assets, how to legally not pay taxes. I'm not talking about illegal actions here. I'm talking about legally avoid paying some of these things. We're not taught this because obviously they'll lose a massive amount of revenue.
Yes. Yes. Now, you sent me a newspaper cutting, which I thought would be timely now because of the
Yeah.
fear mongering and what have you. I'm going to put it on the screen. You won't actually see it, but the audience will. And I should just read a little bit from it, just so that we all know what we're talking about here. It says here, what does it say here? It said, don't trust trusts. It says you may be tempted to put your house into a protection scheme, but don't, says Paul Lewis. Now, I know that he's quite big on the BBC, which of course will raise the hackles of my audience, I'm sure. Radio Times reader Peter did exactly the right thing, tempted by schemes he had seen to put his house into a trust to protect it and other assets from being taken to pay care fees, which sounds like a laudable thing. He asked his financial advisor, who said don't. The advisor was right. Such schemes, it says, do not work, cost you a lot of money, typically several £1,000s, and trusts do not work, cost a lot, and leave your heirs with problems. Anyway, you get the
Get the,
essence of
get
what
the
the
gist of
article
it.
is
Yeah.
going on it. So it's interesting that they sort of started printing this. Presumably then, this must be because they're a bit worried, like so many things, as more people find out what they do, what the rich and elite do, and these people who make these laws, who put their money and assets into trusts. They just don't want everybody else to do it.
No. No, it's serious revenue for
because
them.
otherwise no one's paying for their wonderful extravagant lifestyle.
Do you know? And I think that, what a silly thing to put in. I think it was in the Daily Mail actually. What a silly thing to put in the paper, because all these solicitors who are charging a pretty penny to draft people's trusts for them, are they committing fraud and deception?
Well, there you go. You see, that's a very good question, isn't it?
They
Have to lock them all up.
these people make a lot of money out of doing trusts for people. So for him to say they don't work, you know, there are reasons why some of them wouldn't work, and it would basically be if you had prior notice that you would have to go into a care home, say, for instance, and then you thought,
Right.
oh bug, I better put my house in trust. Then obviously that wouldn't stand up,
Yes.
because we have the 7-year rule for a start. You have to survive 7 years after making the trust for it to be, exempt from care home fees, inheritance tax, etc. So for instance, if you're married and your wife or husband's asked for a divorce and you think, oh bugger, I'm going to lose half my assets, I better write a trust out now, it's too late. You
Yes.
need to do this well in advance. Well in the advance of possibly going into care, well in advance of getting married, well in advance of getting enough assets to be liable for inheritance tax. You need to do it as soon as possible, because you can always add to the trust and you can always take out of the trust. You can update it, when you get richer or poorer or whatever. So if there's a small amount of time between when that trust is written and you pop your clogs, then of course questions will be asked. But if you're 7 years or much more down the road from making that trust, it's perfectly legal, it's perfectly fine, and you are covered, regardless of what Paul Lewis says. And he did make a good point in that article. He said, whatever money you have now, spend it. Enjoy your life, enjoy your retirement. Absolutely, absolutely. But some of us want to leave stuff for our children, our grandchildren, our loved ones. My mum and
Mm.
dad died. They didn't have anything, but I didn't love them any less.
No,
It's not.
quite.
It's not about that. It's if you want to protect your assets without having to pay a load of tax or having to sell your home because you need medical care or old age care in your old age, then do something about it now.
What would be the situation? My father had a girlfriend, which makes her sound very young, but she was in her 80s. He was in his 80s when he had dementia, and then she lived with him. She was a sort of common law wife, I suppose, who has no standing in law as such. And if he wanted to leave stuff to her, um, what was my question here? That he wanted to leave stuff to her, but he died. Um, if he'd put his stuff into the trust, would she be able to get access to it then?
Yes, if he left her as a beneficiary in that trust, yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, even in a will, if you leave anything to anybody, if you're living together and you're not married and you leave them an asset or money or whatever in your will, then they will get that. If you don't leave them in a will and you don't make a trust, because you're not married, the law doesn't recognise um, living in sin, as they used to call it.
Living in sin.
Living in sin. They don't get
At
all they
80,
don't recognize.
at 83, living in
I know.
sin. How dare you?
You could be living together for 30, 40 years, but if you're not
Yeah.
married, it won't be recognized and you won't get anything. So you have to put it in writing where you want your money or your property or whatever you have, where you want it to go. If you don't
Mm.
care, then, fine, don't worry about it. But,
Yeah, no,
we are a
absolutely.
nation of carers. We do care about our loved ones. And, you know, what's it called? Trying to think of the word now. Um, when you live together but you're not married, I can't think of the word now.
Cohabiting.
Cohabitate. If you're cohabitating with somebody, and they're not on this, if you have a property and it's not in joint ownership or tenants in common, then yes, you won't get anything.
No. I mean, these sort of things, they're all, when you've got two people, they've either got the property in both their names, then that can be joyous, but that can also be bloody awkward.
Yeah.
If they, if you're
Yeah.
going through a divorce and you've got one's not paying the mortgage and one is, and all of that,
Yeah.
so you can't just sort of get out. But then you have the reverse, that if both of you are not, both names are on the mortgage or the rental or whatever it is, that one could potentially have an advantage over the other and say, well, I'm sorry, you're not
Yeah.
having it, goodbye. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all this stuff is a minefield, isn't it?
It is. It is. And if you live with somebody and it's your second relationship, your second marriage, and you've got children by a previous marriage or whatever, and you have a joint property, then the deceased children won't get anything. It will go to the surviving spouse. But if you write it in tenants in common, say 50-50, say, you know, when one spouse dies, the one left is left to live in that property for as long as they wish or until they pass, and then when they pass over, everything is split 50-50. And then people have said to me, well, why can't we just put our children on our property as tenants in common? We won't need to make a trust then, because we're giving away a percentage of our property now to our children, which is great. But not all families agree, not all families get on. And say if one of your children you've given a percentage of your property away to falls on hard times and they need their money out, they're quite within the law to make you sell your property, give them their share that you've gifted to them in the tenants in common. So if you make a trust as well, then also they can't make you sell that property, because the trust doesn't come into fruition until you die, and then they get
Right.
their assets. And
Yes.
and it's also a really good idea to write it in tenants in common and do a trust. That way, if you've written away a percentage of your property in tenants in common, it lowers your inheritance tax liability as well. So it will probably kick you out of that trigger when you die, because you're giving away a percentage, 15, 20, 50% of your property while you're alive. And
Yes.
and your beneficiaries can't get at that money until you pass over, if it's in a trust.
If it's in a trust. You also mention on here wills.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that talking about wills not in a trust, just wills, making a will, not necessarily going down to a solicitor to write a will?
No,
Can you write?
yes, you can write your own wills. You can write your own trusts if you do a bit of research and do
Yeah.
what I've done. It's a bit of a boring study, but you don't have to be legally trained to make a will or a trust. I've been doing wills for many, many years.
So
Um,
you can just, I mean, can you literally just say, that I would like to leave this, that, and the other to these people,
yeah.
and then just have signatures to say, yeah, he was of sound mind and
Yeah,
body,
yeah.
and that's what he
Obviously
wanted.
it'll be in there. I'm of sound mind, and I'm not being pressured into doing this. And you get
Yeah.
it witnessed by two independent witnesses, and what it says goes basically. And
Yes.
if you don't have a lot of assets, if you're far below the inheritance tax threshold, then there's no need for a trust. You can just put it in a will, and it will
Yeah.
go to who you want it to. But if it's in a trust, you bypass probate, and probate can take anywhere from a few months to over a year. Um,
Yes.
and you can't get at your assets until probate has been granted. But in a trust, you don't even have to apply for probate. It cuts that out straight away. If you die without making a will, you die intestate, which means that your
Sounds painful.
your loved ones has to apply for letters of administration, and that can take anything up to a year or more. And bear in mind, if somebody dies and they still have a mortgage, what mortgage lender is going to wait over a year for any payments? They could foreclose and they could sell the property, for what is owed, or they could put loads of charges on it, late fees and everything. So when you do eventually get probate granted, you haven't got a bloody lot left.
Hmm.
So there's more than one reason to have a trust. It's lots of reasons, and it cuts out all the paperwork, well, a lot of it anyway.
And is it? I mean, say you go to somebody like yourself or somebody else who's offering private trust. Is that an expensive process?
Well, solicitors will charge 3 grand upwards per private trust. I've spoken to somebody a couple of months ago, and he had a house and 2 plots of land with a, which were on their um, on their own titles, and the solicitor quoted him £15,000, five grand per asset.
Crikey.
So it can get very, very expensive. And a lot of
And
that,
I mean, it is literally a piece of paper. I mean, at the end of the day, it is just an agreement, I suppose, a piece
it's a
of paper
legal
signed by both.
agreement. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
legal
yes.
agreement, and it has to have its three certainties. You have to be, you have to have your, you have to have your right mind. You have to be in your right mind. You can't be coerced. Everything has to be clear. The assets in question has to be clear what these assets are. Like if it's a house, what's the full address? What's its title number? How many bedrooms? Is it detached? It has to be completely clear what this asset is. And it has to be completely clear who your trustees will be and who your beneficiaries will be, the people who, profit from your demise, so to speak. And it has to be witnessed by independent witnesses. And once that's all covered, it's legal. It's a legal document. And people they can't get their head around, well, it's just a piece of paper, Joe. Well, it is, but so is a will, just a piece of paper.
Yes, well, the whole legal profession is like all the commerce is all bits of paper. It is a fake jurisdiction, but we're all stuck with it to a certain
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah. But
And
if it hasn't been signed and it hasn't been witnessed, it's not worth anything.
no,
That's the crucial part, really.
when you said earlier about being coerced, which is very interesting term, we are coerced, are we not, by government to do a number of things?
Yes. Yes. And
So
if people were to actually look into what they're telling us instead of just swallowing it as, fact, we have to do this, we have to do that, they will find that, it's all about scaremongering, really. Going back to COVID and lockdown, I can't say that word, going back to the old lockdown, I was getting jumped on every time I went shopping because I wouldn't wear a mask, and they kept saying, "Well, it's the law. It's the law. No, it's not. No, it's not.
no,
I have free will whether I want to put this thing on my face or not, and I refuse to do that. I don't want to do that. But it's mandate. It means that doesn't mean it's the law. Mandate, it means you still have a choice, and you can still
yeah,
say no. But the
yes.
way they word certain things, frightens people. And people have said to me, well, I get into trouble if I don't register my trust. Well, for a start, you'll be dead by the time they realise you haven't signed it. But no, you won't.
No,
There is no recorded anyone being penalised for not doing this. There's no prosecutions out there.
no. Well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's just this for me. When we talk about coercion, we are being coerced by the government in lots of different ways, like the council tax. They coerce us to pay something,
Yeah.
and if you don't pay it, they just point to the Local Finance Act of 1992, and you go and they say, well, that's how you're supposed to pay it, and you
Well,
go,
council tax is only for businesses, not
well,
residential properties.
well, this is all part of the argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they'll say, and then they'll coerce you with their fake system.
And they're threats, and they're sending debt collectors round who have no authority, they have no power, but they go around intimidating people, and they frighten a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of people over the last 6 months who have been intimidated by these people, and I think that's absolutely disgusting.
So I mean, but just to take that point a stage further, so even though they are acting fraudulently by sending bailiffs on a fake liability order that's not signed by a magistrate from a court that was never actually a proper court, etc., and then the bailiffs come around and they say, well, we're going to take your car. If your car is in a trust, you can just turn around and say, have a go, mate.
Yeah.
Because it's in a trust and there's nothing you can do.
Have
Bye-bye.
a go,
Have a nice day.
or sign it away into somebody else's name. You can still be the driver, and they're the registered keeper, because we don't even own our own cars. We're just a
No.
registered keeper. That's another thing, isn't it? We could go on about. I mean, I've put my car in my son's name, so they can't touch my car. And because these people who come around demanding money, they don't care about trust. They don't know about trust. They don't know anything to do with it. So they'll just go ahead and do what they've come to do, or try anyway. But, you know, don't be frightened of these people. They're doing a job. It's a rubbish job, but they're doing a job, but they have no power over you at all. They cannot come into your home. They cannot make you talk to them. I mean, just ignore them and they'll go away. And after a while, they'll sell it to another debt collection agency. And then after a while, they'll go away because they know they have no power.
Hmm.
And anyway, if they've bought that debt, so that's a council
They've
tax
paid it
bill,
for you.
they've already paid it. They've already bought it. So what are they chasing you for? Thank you
Yeah,
very much. You
exactly.
paid my council tax. Well done.
Yes, that's it. Um, what else was I going to ask you? Oh, there was a funny anomaly talking about people dying and things. Is that when my mum died some years ago now, bless her little socks, we were looking. She hadn't left a funeral plan because she was going to give her body to science. Trouble was, science didn't want it. Which I know sounds awful,
Oh dear.
but she thought she was an alcoholic, you see,
Yeah.
and by the time she died, she was basically in a pickling jar, and she thought that her body would be very useful for people to chop up to see what happens to the
Yeah.
body when it deteriorates. And I thought that was actually a sensible thing. Turns out, science, as it is, doesn't want bodies that are in a bad state. They just want to see the perfect body, so they rejected it,
Right.
which was strange. Anyway, so we were suddenly left. Oh gosh, she hasn't got a funeral plan because she thought that was going to happen. So in doing a bit of research, we discovered that actually you don't have to have a funeral,
No.
and you don't actually have to bury or burn a body as long as it's not causing a what is it? Well, there's some legal term like a nuisance.
Yeah.
It's not
Odor.
sort of odor. It's not smelling and causing problems.
Yeah.
You could literally have it taxidermied, or you could put it in a bath of salts, whatever it is, formaldehyde or whatever.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, just as an anomaly and of curiosity. That way you wouldn't actually have a funeral. You wouldn't, if they've got no money left, you could just not have a death certificate. And if they didn't owe anything,
Yeah.
it would be quite a sort of one up on the government because they'd never know that somebody's part. Obviously, if you took their pension, if they had a pension, that would be illegal to do that because you would be
Yeah.
acting
Yeah. I
fraudulently.
mean, in my book, it says, it tells you the process of what you can do when your loved one passes. Now,
Hmm.
everybody thinks, oh, we've got to register the death, otherwise we can't have a funeral, right? But then what do we do? And the process is different to whether you've, made a trust or not. It's much easier if you've made a trust. But if you haven't made a trust and you haven't made a will, you have to wait for probate again. And then you have to notify the banks and you have to notify, the benefit agencies if they're on pensions or whatever. Or, if they're still paying their utilities, then you have to notify them. Otherwise, they're going to want their money. Then there's a whole process, and I go into detail in this process what you need to do when your loved one passes,
Hmm.
and the difference between having a will, not having a will, having a trust, and not having a trust. Because we don't know these things. My mum died 13 years ago, and she left her house to me, and I didn't tell anybody. I told nobody because she didn't have enough assets
Hmm.
for them to worry about, you know. But we just arranged the funeral and that was it. Cancelled the bank account and that was done.
Yes, I mean my argument would be why have we got to involve the government in the first
Yeah,
place in any of these bloody things? I
I
mean,
think
I know there's this legal thing, but that really only affects persons and people who are in that jurisdiction,
yeah,
which I know a lot of people don't fully understand. But
but we've been
why
we've
should the
been
government be?
trained, haven't we? We've been trained from little children to do as we're told, to give all these corporate entities all our personal information because they
Yes,
ask for it, and you don't have to do it. You don't have to tell them anything. It's none of their business. But
No, well, it's like
we
registering a child. You can
yes,
register a child. I mean, you can not register your newborn baby. You don't have to. Don't let
that's
them
in my
claim
book
the
as
corporate
well.
name.
That's in my book as well.
I did see that. I saw. That's what I saw. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, if you don't go in the system, you
yeah.
can't use the system. So you can't use the NHS. You don't get an NHS number. Banks are loath to give you some money. But unless people actually start to get out of the system, and we have a generation of people who are not using it, the new opportunities would come. It's just all the time this system exists.
I think it's people are frightened to not comply.
Yes.
And when people keep saying lose the fear, and it's a bit difficult to lose the fear because people don't want horrible people knocking on their door demanding this and that, But once you do lose the fear, it's really quite simple. You just don't consent. No, I
Mm.
don't consent. No, I'm not putting a mask on. I don't consent. No, I'm not paying you any money. Show me the contract. Where's my contract to say I owe you this money? People don't ask these questions. They just do it because they don't want to get into trouble because we've been conditioned so much. And I get
Yes.
it.
Well, the system is so fragile, really,
Yeah,
that the only way that it can work is if we don't know about it or we're frightened. And they've done a very good job of frightening us, so we
they
all
have.
comply. But the
Yeah,
minute we don't comply en masse and take council tax,
yeah,
I mean, I can't think of any other time apart from the poll tax riots, possibly, where
yeah.
people are now actually going, hang on a second, no, not going to do this because where does the money go in the first place? It doesn't actually go. It doesn't go. A friend of mine worked out what we should on an average band house in an average town should be paying about £500, and the town would have enough money to do all the stuff it's supposed to do. But
Yeah.
60 or 65% goes to the Consolidate Fund anyway.
Yeah, I think they've actually hung themselves because every year they put it up and up and up, and the same as utilities, they're putting it up so people can't, they can't keep warm, they can't survive, and people are going, this can't be right. Where's all this money? And the people are now starting to ask questions. Where's all this money going? What am I
Mm,
getting out of this? You know who.
mm.
Who say that I have to pay, yeah, 200 to £300 a month for what?
Well,
For
exactly.
what? Your
Uh,
NHS is paid for, on your national insurance. I mean, your taxes go to the government who pay your utilities straight to the national grid. You know, where's it going? Where's this money going?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it seems to be going abroad.
Well, that's another thing. You do know it's illegal to pay any forms of tax like council tax or income tax if your money is used to fund wars.
Yes,
That's
that's right.
illegal. So are you committing, are we committing, well, I'm not, are you committing a crime by paying these bills? Because
Well, you
your
would be. I
money,
mean, if you're sending your money to people who are financing
yeah,
war zones where innocent men, women, and children are dying or being injured, then that is illegal,
yes.
and the government shouldn't be doing it. And if they are doing it, then they're acting fraudulently.
So
And the thing
you'll
is,
get
they
into
know this.
trouble. Yeah, exactly. You'll get into trouble from the government for not paying, but then you could get into trouble for financing genocidal wars. You know, what's the worst thing to happen? I mean, they've got you
Yes.
both ways, really, haven't they?
Absolutely, and so that's why the sort of conditional acceptance things work very well. You say, "Well, I'm happy to pay my way in life,
Yeah.
but just prove to me first that you're not actually doing nefarious and illegal things with it.
And where
Because
is
if
it
you
going?
are,
Yeah,
I'm not part of it." And that's a very noble and honourable thing to do.
and legal.
And it does stay within their silly
Yeah,
legal system.
within their rules. They're legal,
Yes.
well, you're not breaking their legal rules by asking that question, and you're not refusing to pay. You're just holding that money separately in a safe place, in a trust perhaps, until they can prove to you where your money is going.
Yes.
That's not
Yes.
too much to ask.
Except that because they are breaking the rules all themselves. So in your book, you've got loads of different sort of ideas and questions and all of this. It's very easy to sort of quickly pick up and get the
Yeah.
answers
Not
from
not
it.
all not all will apply to everybody because it gets a little bit technical when you want to put your cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or whatever in a trust, and if you want to put a limited company in a trust, that's, that gets quite technical. But, if you've just got an odd few questions, can I sell my properties in trust? Can a beneficiary be a trustee? It's all set out. And all the questions that I've been asked, I've made a note of, and I've researched, and I've put it all in the book. So everything in that book is on the internet if you want to go look for it.
Yes.
But you have to be aware that you may need to look for this information, because a lot of people are not aware that they may face financial ruin. Whether they marry the wrong person and they sue them for half their estate, or they die and their house is worth quite a lot of money and they lose a lot of that to inheritance tax. Most people don't realize they could be in that bracket. And because the average house price is around 277,000 now in the UK, if you've got other assets, investments, savings, life cover, that's all gets added on. So it's not too far of a reach to go over your inheritance tax threshold of 325. And yes, I know that you can get more allowance. Because people will jump on the bandwagon and say, well, she didn't mention this, she didn't mention that. Well, if you leave it to children, grandchildren, foster children, you get an extra 175 grand on top of your allowance. And also, if your partner, your spouse dies and they haven't used up all their allowance, you get that as well. So, basically, you can get quite a lot allowance. But if you have no children and you're not married, and you're going to be lumbered, and your house, your assets are worth over 325. You're going to get taxed. As simple as that.
Yes, I love the words, allowance.
Yeah,
as if somebody somewhere has got the authority to be able to say, well, you're allowed this much. You can't have all of your stuff.
Oh, Richard, what really pees me off is that you're allowed to give away 3 grand of your own money a year. You're allowed to do that. Isn't that good of them?
That's very nice. I just ignore all that.
Yeah,
my
you
kids
can give
are
away
constantly asking for money.
As long as you survive them 7 bloody years. You can give away what you want. It's ridiculous. It really is, and it's getting worse. You can't draw money out of the bank without telling them and proving to them what it's for. It's your damn money.
Well, I saw a video the other day. This made me laugh. I can't remember. I think it was on Chris Brooks's lovely show. And it was a policeman came up to some bloke and he had £1,000 in cash on it. And they said, we think that's drug money. And we're going to take it off you. And he said, it's not drug money. And they said, well, you've got to prove that it isn't. He said, hang on a minute. That's a bit reversed, isn't it? You're accusing me of something. The evidence is for you to gather that I'm guilty, not the other way round. And I don't quite know what happened because it kind of cut off a bit towards the end, but apparently he was arrested or what have you. This poor chap.
It's unbelievable that they can.
And he's like, you've got your own money on your. Well, it's never your own money because it's still, the fiat currency, but we're all having to deal with it.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? That they're telling you what to do with your own stuff. How.
Yeah, I could understand if he was carrying suitcases of money. That might look a bit suspicious, and they may say, "Look, just can you just verify that very politely, Dixon.Green politely?" That would be one thing. But £1,000, you might be paying off the painter. You may have been paid in cash. You may have just gotten to your cash book or whatever and been paid.
I think that's a breach. That's a breach of their power. It really is. That's that's horrendous. I saw that video, and I saw the video of the guy who went into the bank and he wanted to draw out a few £1,000, I think, to buy his son a motorbike, and they wanted proof. They wanted to see what they want to know what sort of bike it was. They wanted to get it up on his phone to show them what bike he was going to purchase, get an invoice for it, to draw his own money out to buy his son a bike.
This is why we're going a bit off topic here, but this is why we need a different type of banking system altogether. Because all the time we use fiat currency, we depose our money with them. Yeah, we give them all those rights.
And you don't pay anything by direct debit. Transfer money monthly. I do. Every week I draw money out of the bank and I use cash to buy whatever I need. If it's diesel, if it's food, I pay. It's not inconvenient. You've got a cash point usually right next to the supermarkets. We've just got to keep this cash alive. We've just got to keep, using cash
Absolutely.
before it's too late.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, your book, here it is. It's Protect What's Yours. And is it available from all good bookshops, all that sort of
Well,
thing?
it's unfortunately it's available on Amazon, but that was the quickest and easiest way I could get it out there. Now it's 17.95, I believe. Yeah, 17.95. It's 9.99 on Kindle and 20 odd quid on hardback. Now I get around £8.50 a book. They keep the rest. They take over 50%. So I've
Can they
gone down.
get? Can people get it direct from you, signed and autographed,
They
and
can, and I actually started touring just before Christmas, and I've done a few talks in the Suffolk area, Needham Market, Stowe Market, Beccles. Thank you for everybody who came. Thank you, Ben, for arranging the Stowe Market. Also, I went up to Cumbria. Thank you, Paul and Jackie. The hospitality was beautiful. It was lovely. Thank you so much. Because everyone said to me, "Can you come to our town? Can you come to our city?" Yes, I can. So if you want to email me on my new website, which is josephinewolloconsultancy.com, you can send me an email and book me for a talk. I don't charge for doing talks, but if you want to bung me a little bit of petrol money or comment, or if I have to stay over, just a little bit for my expenses, so that would be greatly appreciated. And I just want to get the word out there, really. I just want to get it out there. It may not be applicable to you, but it's all information that either you or somebody really needs to hear.
mm, mm.
And if you
Brilliant.
want,
Well,
and if you want any mortgage advice, then you can email me on my JW Mortgage Protection email, and I can give you free mortgage advice. There's no charge for that at all. I've been doing it forever, so I can't find you the best rate, but I can tell you everything else you'll need to know about mortgage. And if you want to know what the best rate is, I can refer you on to somebody.
can you go to a mortgage broker these days and say, "Look, I know what the scam is. You want my signature on a document, and therefore you're going to make a lot of money. Um,
They
just
wouldn't
make the
have
money."
a bloody clue, Richard. They wouldn't have a clue. Do you know what? I was in the financial industry for over 19 years, and I didn't have a clue about it until 5 years ago. And when I woke up to the fraudulent nature of all this, but there's a very, very few, should we say, awake people in the financial industry, because the longer you're in that, the more the more you get brainwashed, basically.
Yes, I can imagine.
Um,
Like any profession, the longer you're in it,
Yeah,
you believe you know
and in
everything.
that book, let me just say, I have to be careful what I put in that book. But what I'll say is, read between the lines. Um, there are legal ways around the GROB rules, gifts with reservation of benefit. Look it up. There is
The
ways.
what? The GROB rules? Say that again.
GROB rules, GROB, gifts with reservation of benefit. There are legal ways around that. It's in the book. Because all the complaints I had were about, oh, she didn't mention this, she didn't. Well, I didn't have the bloody time, to be honest with
No.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
So
just,
yeah. So
it's just to pique people's interest. It's just to say, have a look. Do you need
yeah.
this?
Well, I'll put a link on the in the description, and if you could just send me the email addresses, I'll put those in, and then people can and which one goes where, and then people can email you as and when required.
I
Just to
will
say
do.
once more, if you're watching there, that this is not financial advice. It's not
No.
audio advice either, because I've just cocked up my earpiece,
And I do
and
ask,
not legal
I do
advice.
ask, I do ask for a donation because I still have one of those awful mortgages, and I still need to live. And I gave up a very, very well-paid job last May to do this, and I would like to continue doing this, but I need a little bit of help, to
Yes.
continue putting the word out there. Just like you, we can't live on fresh air. Um, but my donations are far, far less than any solicitor's charges would
Yes.
be.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Brilliant. Well done, you. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you got something out of all of that.
Can I
Fascinating. Great to have you
just say,
back.
I'm so
Yeah, of course.
sorry. Could I just say, I've just forgotten. I'm actually in Guildford on the 12th and 13th of June. I'm there at an art exhibition, but I can give a talk in Guildford on the 12th or 13th of June if anyone would like to email me and set it up. Sorry about that.
Oh, right. But whereabouts? I mean, I might be walking along the River Way on the 12th of June, but I'd
Well,
have no idea where to go.
I'll be on the high street. I do a little bit of painting on the quiet, and I'm exhibiting a couple of my paintings in the high street in the it's the calf it's a calf gallery or something like that.
So
Um,
if you see a strange looking painter, as in portraits or landscape, that sort of thing.
yes, all that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not you know, not you're not
I'm
slapping
not,
on
I'm not a
emulsion.
painter and decorator.
No, right, mate. Yeah, no worries. I'll tell you what you do with your money. Bung it in a trust. It's very easy. It's hang on a
yeah,
minute.
yeah,
Pass the
yeah.
set rag. I've got a bit.
So
Not that.
I'm on the high street in the calf gallery. People who live there will probably know where it is. But
Yeah.
I'm there for the weekend, starting the 13th. But I'm coming down on the 12th because that's like 2.5 hour drive for me. So I'll go on the 12th. So if anyone wants me to give a talk on the 12th or the 13th in the evening, just let me know. That'll be
There you
lovely.
go. God, it's easy, isn't it? Get on the Vogue show.
Yeah.
Plug yourself. Left, right, and centre. Oh dear. Anyway, lovely to have you on, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on.
Much appreciated, Richard. Thank you.
That's all right. I'll leave all the links in the description. People can go and do all what they need to do, and then you also come along, get an art class at the same time. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, let me know what you think.
Yeah, that would be good. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests in due course. But until then, from Joe and I, thank you for watching. Till next time, goodbye.